The next thing we need to do with the sliding canopy system is to go ahead and install the rear piece of canopy glass that's fixed. As you can see, it needs to come down a little bit, and we need to make it go, probably have to make it go forward a little bit after we get it done. So what we'll end up doing is we're going to cut the canopy a little shorter than it's supposed to be, and we'll leave a vertical piece here that will be trimmed off later at the same level as just below this. Probably we'll probably put one bolt here and one back here somewhere to hold everything nice and tight and in place. And what that'll do is that'll take up any extra little gap that we have right here. So we'll go ahead and get this cut just above where it's supposed to be. So what we'll do is I'll mark this right along that line with the pen, and then I'll make that cut, and then we'll dry fit it and see what we look like. The canopy has been trimmed down. We just went right to the top of the molded framework at the bottom. So now it sits down, it has the right level. It's just a tad high, but that's okay. But it's a little bit too far back. So what we need to do is we need to take the Dremel with the sanding drum and grind out some of this this lip right here so that it sits forward a little bit, and it'll actually drop down a little bit more when it sits forward. So that'll make that height just perfect right there at the top. And once we do that, then we'll take some balsa and we'll mount it to the top of this right here. It's an 1/8 inch or 3/16 balsa, whatever I have lying around, and we'll mount it to the top of the lip here, and that'll give us a good spot to screw the canopy to. So I'll go ahead and take care of that. We'll get that ground out with the Dremel tool, and then we'll try refitting the canopy again. You can see here that we have the rear framework installed. Just cut this out of balsa and glued it on with CA. And I put a couple stops in right here. So that's as far back as the rear glass wants the canopy to come. So that's where we stopped it. The canopy, rear canopy section has been cut to fit, and you have your step in there. So what we'll do now is trim it off so that it comes down and it angles right to there on both sides. Then the next step is going to be to put the stiffener in it and then get it mounted. You can see here that I have the rear glass installed now. Okay, we're using 4 screws on each side to hold it in place. Nothing back here. To finalize this installation of the rear glass, what we'll do is I'll take it back off and I'll soak this with some thin CA and let it dry real good. Then I'll put the rear glass back on, which you can see is extremely stiff, which helps rigid, makes everything else more rigid. And once we get this back on, we'll cut this canopy to shape where we want, so it looks like it's properly framed, and we'll make the shims that go in here, get them sanded down and installed, and then we'll go ahead and mount the windshield with screws. And at that point, the installation of the canopy itself is complete. The only thing that we'll have left to do is to mechanize it with the 2 actuators. One will be mounted back here, one will be mounted up here behind the firewall. And you can see it actuates very well, nice and smooth. So this will be a very smooth, nice working canopy when it's finished, when I get the mechanized, get the actuators in. I just wanted to point out here, this canopy sticks out a little bit right here. So when I put this stiffener in, they have to be bent in so that they're going inside the rear slider. And that's on both sides right here. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll get the glass off and soak this with thin CA, let it dry. I'll put that back on, and then we'll come back and start doing the final mounting for the windshield. So make sure all of that fits properly when it gets mounted up. Okay, we have the windshield trimmed down to where we want it so it looks appropriate. And you can see I have these pencil marks on here, right here. And what those are going to do is we need to make a shim that will sit in here and cover this part of the track up. That brings this back down to flush with the fuselage, but brings the back end of the trailing edge of the windscreen out far enough for the stiffeners, the air dam stiffeners, to get up and underneath of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of plywood that's the appropriate thickness, get it cut using those marks to make the right cut, and then we'll get it glued on here. And once it's on here, we'll shave it down a little bit at a time until it sits flush in the front and it is sticking out in the back, so that we can catch this lip on the slider canopy. And what we'll probably end up doing is bending each side of the rail here down a little bit so that it kind of scoops underneath of it, so we don't miss it. Okay, and you can see I have the rear glass is mounted. It's all been soaked with CA on here so that it's nice and sturdy. It's very stiff. So that's all finished back there, and once we get this done, it'll be time to start go ahead and putting the actuators in. Here you can see we have the shims installed. And what I did was I cut them out of 1/8" plywood, and I CA'd them with thick CA onto the airframe. Sanded it down a little bit with the sanding drum, then used a T-sander to flatten it out real nice. Did that on both sides. And then we'll start from up here and individually put screws down, making sure that we maintain a nice seal here, and same thing down the other side. So what we have now is, you can see that the canopy slides nice and free, closes very well. And everything looks good. So, and everything in the back looks good. I have a slight gap right there. I'm really not too worried about that. Everything's moving freely in the back, shutting very well. So the next step will be to put your actuators in, and we'll start that tomorrow. I'll pick this up tomorrow morning in the middle of our snowstorm that we're about to have.